start the night. We can have everybody grab a seat. That'd be great. Thank you. Well, hopefully you guys find lunch to be a good use of your time. I'm a big fan of the fact that the conferences and validation of experiences and great folks about stuff they're doing, as well as a little bit of hands-on practice, if you will. It's nothing like trying to start to figure things out. So this afternoon, we're going to have a panel to kick things off. We're going to have some folks who are actually doing this in practice across a variety of different approaches. Talk a little bit about how other companies and organizations basically move from that concept that we talked about this morning, so you have an idea of a little cocktail napkin that you want to move through the process, all the way to launch an operating application. And we're going to have some folks talk about this. There's many paths to this. We talked about it a little bit this morning. There's a lot of different approaches. I would encourage you really to, at the end of the presentations that the panelists go through, to really ask a lot of questions. Ask about their unique perspectives and insights about how their company goes about this, or their organization goes about it, what's unique about it, what things they potentially tried in the past that maybe aren't effective, or that they've changed or evolved over time. Starts to give you a little bit of a flavor for how this works. So without further ado, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll get on with the presentations.
Hello, that's it. Okay. I'm Keith Bourne, and I am a mobile strategist for Arbormoon, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in my presentation. But basically, I work with wide variety of clients and helping them figure out what how they can utilize mobile and whatever it is that they're trying to do.
I'm Angela Kujava. I am the Director of Innovation for Logic Solutions. We are web and mobile developers. We're actually celebrating our 6th year this year in mobile development. And I am directly involved in a lot of the project management of some of our mobile projects.
Hi there, I'm Fred Dillon. I'm Director of Product Development for HopeLab. We're a nonprofit based out of California and right just south of San Francisco in Redwood City, and we develop products for food health and wellness for young people.
So my name is Larry Ahn. I'm a general internist. I'm director for the Center for Communications Research, and actually a faculty champion for digital health as part of the Med School's Fast Forward Innovation Initiative, where I've learned a lot of new words that you guys are learning about, sort of value canvas and customer. So that's been a great experience for me. I have the pleasure of leading our center. It was founded by Victor Strecker. It's been in existence 20 years. And we do work in tailored and personalized health communication across a range of channels and technologies.
Thanks. So I'll give one more pitch for Larry's group. So for all the people who are in the breakout groups, for the exception of a couple of my colleagues, Larry and Rex Timms, who's Deputy Director over at CHCI, were very nice to volunteer the time with some really great talented people to help co-facilitate a lot of groups. So I cannot thank Larry and his team enough for doing that. I think it's fantastic. So you're in the hands of some learned folks who are really going to help you out. So without further ado, we're going to let Angela talk about Logic Solutions. Each of the teams is going to present for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're going to kind of do Q&A at the conclusion of that, kind of up the process. So we'll let folks get started.
Okay, so I intend to hopefully help you learn how to work well with a developer. So just to get a feeling, how many people in the room already have an idea that requires software development or hardware with a software component? Great. How many of you have a web component? Web and mobile? Just mobile? Okay. How many don't know yet? Exactly. So what I want to talk about is with your idea, what do we mean by developer? You may actually need a wide array of experts to get your idea off the ground. So, okay. Some people here you may need to talk to: business analysts, programmers, database and integration developers, content writers, SEO experts potentially to really disseminate your idea. Maybe you need content writers. Maybe you need people who are experts at deployment. One thing that I want to really stress on this slide, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, is UI UX experts or user interface, user experience people. I think if I can stress one thing about what you will learn in development and what makes a successfully accepted product, is it has to be easy for people to use. They have to not think about using it in order to use it. And that's really become even more important with the proliferation of mobile development. You think about everything you can do on here. Just this morning, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to see my meeting notes while giving this talk, and I said, oh, there's got to be some sort of app for that, right? And click through and use it, right? And so I'm trying to figure out which one is the easiest for me to use and which one is the freest for me to purchase in order to do that today. So I think when we think about this with everything now, everything has to be that easy to use. I'll talk a little bit about working with a developer who's not a subject matter expert, because probably that's going to be the case. You're going to work with people who are experts at software development, not experts at what you do. But it doesn't matter, because the developer's process should be such that a good developer's process is such that they will say, or you will say, I knew all the details. I knew the pros and cons of every decision that I needed to make. I felt like I could make educated decisions, and I felt in control the whole time. And so a process includes some core values, which are relationships. What does your relationship look like with the developer? Is this just a project-based, one-on-one, one-and-done relationship where they're going to work on your project, implement it, and that's all? Is this a more dedicated relationship, or even dedicated teams of people who work on nothing but what you are trying to develop? Communication. How will you communicate with each other? Do you establish one point of contact on each side and sort of all information gets funneled through those two people? Or does the entire team talk with each other? What cadence do you talk to each other? Do you have a once-a-week meeting, once every 2 weeks? Maybe you need to have daily stand-ups to make sure that everything you're working on is going in a timely fashion. None is right or wrong. It's whatever is right or wrong for your project and your relationship together. Documentation, everything needs to be documented. Don't ever think that you're going to go into something and not have some confusion down the road. That's why we document the requirements, specifications, meeting and project notes. Everything should be documented and saved. Received tools. How are you going to do all that? Right? Project collaboration portals are great tools. There's many of them out there, and they're not all paid tools, right? So my team, my creative team at Logic Solutions, we use a free tool called Trello, and that works for us. And it's almost like a corkboard full of sticky notes, but it's electronic, and you can move things and check them off and get things done, and it's great. So not everything has to be really a high-tech tool in order for it to work for you. Bug trackers, obviously, with any software build, there are going to be bugs, and you need to log them and resolve them and assign people to them. And then source code repository. So every time you do new development, you want to make sure that you save the previous version in case something happens and you have to go back to it. So checking your code every day is a good idea. Okay, so knowing the basics. All developers are going to ask you a million questions, right? They will ask questions at the beginning, they'll ask questions in the middle, and they'll ask questions in the end. It's helpful for you to be able to know some of those initial questions that developers will pose to you. And checklists can be really helpful with this. I have a checklist that I give to people, put the URL online, but there are many things there that you can use. And so, if you're working with people who are not subject matter experts, first and foremost, they need to understand what is the purpose, who is the audience, And what's the value of your project? And you notice that I was looking for the materials that you will be working on at your different breakout sessions. That's part of establishing, that's part of what you will establish here with the project that you've chosen is really what purpose does my project serve? Then there are some additional basic questions. So once we know what the objective is, what your goals are, defining success. What does success look like for me for this project? Maybe end success once it's all said and done and people are using it, or maybe success of the first phase of this project. Who are the target users? And not just your target audience, but what roles do they play? So perhaps you have the end user who might be a patient and they need to sort of interact as a consumer, if you will, with your application, but you also have physicians who might be administering data in the back end or hospital administrators who might be doing that. You need to define who everybody is in this application. Devices. Is it a mobile device? Is it a web device? If it's mobile, which size? Is it a phone? Is it a tablet? Is it a phablet? Which phones? So Android, iOS, BlackBerry. If you're doing web, you need it to be responsive so that if somebody is looking at it on your phone, it presents the right presentation. Does everybody know what responsive web design is? So, you go to some websites and in order to see them on your phone, you have to pinch and scroll and do whatever. Responsive web design, the layout changes depending on what device is accessing that web page. Operating systems, another thing, browsers. And I tell you how many times we run into problems where it looks great on Chrome and it looks great on Firefox, but somebody's got an old version of Internet Explorer and the thing's crazy, right? So defining, what kind of browsers your users you suspect that they're using and making sure that you test on all of those. Then it comes to functionality. What does this thing do, right? What's the data structure? Is there data structure? Are you capturing data? And where does it go? Where is it housed? Do you have security concerns? And what's your security matrix? Is it, do you need to be HIPAA compliant? And if yes, what does that mean? Do you have a graphic designer on your team? And if not, you need to hire a graphic designer. And what's the aesthetic that you're going for? Are you going for something fun that maybe younger people are interacting with, or is this for the elderly? And maybe you need a whole different presentation. How are you distributing this? Is it private? Is it for use within the hospital and within all of their firewalls and security issues? Or is it public distribution, or both? Phasing, right? So do you have different steps that you'd like to accomplish? And then, of course, budget. So, common pitfalls in working with a developer. If I can stress one thing to you today, it is, thank you for recognizing it was Atari. I showed this to my team who was full of 20-somethings, and they pull out faces. Yeah. So, things get problematic in projects when you don't know what you want. And that sounds really pedantic, I know. But I can't stress that enough, that workflow. How do you get from A to B? Or how do you get from A to B to C? Or X or Z? What needs to be done? Your developers could guess, but then that creates problems where they guessed wrong, and now you have to redo that work, and that's not something that you want to do. It is especially important, I'm going to go back to this again, when you talk about usability of the app and making it easy for people to use what you have built. So you don't have to do the usability evaluation. You don't have to say, oh, the back button should be here. Developers can do that, but we need to know, is there a back button? If we press this and things don't go right, then what happens? If you're signing up and somebody doesn't have an email, is there an alternative for that? Right? So thinking about those issues, thinking about who your audience is and what they need to do, that's really critical. And so you don't necessarily have to have that all defined when you go talk to a developer. A developer can help you create that. And when you do have a developer help you create that, a lot of times you get very good results because they know they can program it and that there aren't going to be any trip-ups in the programming. At the same time, there's cost involved with that, so that's just what you need to keep in mind. If this is something that you want to hire somebody to do, they'll do it, and hopefully they'll do a very good job. But that is a place where you'll incur costs. You can kind of sketch out your workflow and then take it to a developer for refinement, and that's what a lot of people do. Or you can hire somebody else altogether to create it. Hire a design usability firm that does nothing but this, or you can do it yourself. Another pitfall, and I'll give you a real life example of this, is terminology. So I'm going to go back to that word usability, and I ran into this recently where a prospect kept saying, I just want you to look at the usability. They had a prototype for me. I want you guys to look at the usability. So we said, great, okay, did an evaluation of their prototype. Here's what we think we need to improve on the screens. Didn't realize is what they really meant was, we want you to look at our concept and build out what we haven't done. We want you to build the usability from start to finish. And so it created some confusion because, as developers, we have a set terminology, and as non-developers, somebody else uses those things differently. So what I recommend is, if at any point, and you know this just in conversations, with your family, with your friends, every once in a while you think, I don't know if they really got what I meant. And take a step back and take out any of the technical jargon. Just say, in this case with this prospective client, had they said to me, I just really want you to build the rest of it. Just make the rest of it. There's nothing technical in there, and I would have understood. But because they were using that term that to me means something very technical, that's where the confusion arose. And then last pitfall, and I know this is product development 101, but I really think it's important to mention again the idea of concept of minimum viable product. So ideas are exciting. That's why you're in this room today, right? It takes a special kind of person to be an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs are passionate, and they can't wait to do something to change the world. And you wouldn't be here if in some way you didn't want to do something that changed the world. The end goal is exciting, but along the way you're bound to have some limitations. It might be budget, it might be timeline where you have an idea that takes 12 months to build, but you've got to get it out in 6 months. It might be resources where the developer says to you, I need you for 7 hours a week on this, and you have 5 to give. So have an idea really of what you need for minimum viable product to get the ball rolling and get some acceptance so that you can get funding or time or resources or whatever it is to get to that big exciting end goal that you want to see. And that's it. So my door is always open. My contact information is a little skewed up there, but it's up there. Give me a call anytime. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to Keith from the party now. So what happens when I get some zero? I that's when you drop to the floor. I don't get started on that.
Guys are doing awesome.
Okay, hi everyone. Okay, so I'm with Arbormoon. This is the point where I talk about all the clients we have and stuff like that. But the main thing that I'm trying to show you here is that we work with a wide range of groups. So we're familiar with different environments and different ways people work and things like that. And a lot of the resources go into well-known projects. But then a lot of the innovation coming out of these smaller startups, you may not know these names as much. University of Michigan Healthcare System probably rings a bell. But this actually, the project we worked on was a startup that is now spun out of that system. And this is what you see probably a lot more of the efforts closer to what you guys are doing. But yeah, sort of the whole thing that we're used to working with a lot of different groups, and depending on what angle you're coming at, whether you're doing research with this or whether you're actually coming up with a mobile product or what have you, we work with a lot of different things like that. So that's just to give you a background of what we've done in the past, so you know kind of where I'm coming from on this. But a little bit about what I do. I'm not a sales guy.
and the reason why I call myself anti-sales is because I have been known to talk clients out of projects. And this happens sometimes. We find that, that mobile isn't actually what you need, or maybe you want mobile, but you want to do something like what we call COTS, commercial off-the-shelf software is out there. You don't realize, because you're not familiar with the mobile world, that there's something already there that you can use and it fits your needs. So, but typically what I do is I come in, just really at any stage that you're at, whether you just have an inkling of an idea to where you have a real strong definition of what you want, and I kind of help get you honed in on what it is that you want to end up actually building, once you get to mobile. And along the way, we might end up finding out that you don't want to actually use custom development, which is what our firm does, but that there's a better, more cost-effective way to do that. And then my focus really is on just essentially coming up with a roadmap for mobile development, where you're looking at all the different things, you're weighing cost effectiveness with the functionality that you need, and then sort of prioritizing what you want to do first. Sort of in a generic sense, some companies will want to focus on like inventory management over something that's consumer oriented or something along those lines, because they actually have a better ROI on return on the investment for what they're doing on that. So a lot of times we'll have clients come to us and say, hey, I really want to do something mobile, and they're usually thinking about those apps on their phones that they want to get out there in front of customers. But a lot of times you find out that, well, actually you can do something better back in the warehouse, or you can do something that's making something else within the company much more effective, and the dollars you spend there are going to have more impact than what you could have done for the consumer product. So that's where I come, and then eventually we come up with a plan, and I get into the actual project, if there is one to do, and we work to make sure that what is developed actually meets the goals of what we talked about. In terms of some of the activities that we have, Angela talked about UX a lot, and I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize early on is that UX starts well before you have a defined product. You really want to start off sort of stepping back from what you have in mind. You certainly have a context of what you want to do. There's typically a problem out there that you're trying to solve. And so within that context, you're looking to see, what is the best way I can utilize mobile to solve that problem. And that's where the UX research really comes in. It helps you essentially figure out what is the best way to help somebody solve that problem from a mobile standpoint. If it's outside of mobile, it's not outside of what I do, but there's other things there too. But that's really what, and with UX, you're always talking about, what is the goal of the user using this app, and you're trying to figure out, how can you help them accomplish that goal in the most seamless way. One of the things too about working with a development firm is the mobile expertise in particular. Even if you have design in-house and things like that, there's typically something that's more specific to mobile than just your typical design. A lot of times we get into trouble if a web designer is doing design for mobile because they want to design it like a website. And these are not websites; they're pieces of software. So you actually are better off with someone that has software design experience, like things that are on your computers and things like that, because that's more akin to what we are doing in mobile development. We're not putting like an about us page and stuff like that up at the top of the app like what we do on our website. So that kind of expertise in the design field is important, and then and also just there's significant differences across the two platforms in a lot of different areas. Like UX is a big part of it, design, just the functionality and knowing what capabilities each platform has. One example really is in the health kit. If anybody's thinking about tapping into health kit and they're doing stuff there, well, on Android, that's really only available in it's like a health kit on Android, but it's really not available on anything but 5.0, and 5.0 is only available to 3% of the market right now. Whereas on iOS, they're 80% plus have already updated to iOS 8, and that's where HealthKit is. So depending on the platform, what you're trying to achieve, the platform is going to play a big role in what you're doing there. But the UX is a big part too. Is, I don't know how many people have ever switched from Android to iOS or vice versa. It's painful, right? And if you've done that, that gives you an idea of why you're designing specifically for a platform in terms of your UX. Because if you design an iOS app and then try to port it over to Android as is, that app is going to give the user that same painful experience that you had when you switched over to the platform, and that's what you're trying to avoid in that. These platforms essentially train people to interact with devices in a very systematic way, and it's once you've been trained, it's very hard to switch over, and it's part of their secret sauce, but at the same time, it's something you want to be aware of when you're doing mobile development. And then Agile is really kind of the key thing. Agile is essentially a software development approach. There's really two ends to the spectrum. There's what we call waterfall, where basically you define every single little characteristic of the piece of software. You give the developer like a 400-page document that has everything completely determined from every single button and functionality you can imagine. And then the other opposite end of that spectrum is Agile, which essentially is a very iterative process where you're going through typically between 2 and 4 weeks, and you're constantly bringing in new feedback from the outside world and even internal people that have a important role in the project, and things often change, and the waterfall concept is a great, in theory, concept, and actually as a developer, a lot of developers will say, it's not a very great approach, but it's really, in theory, it's a great approach in the sense that, if you just give me a big document with everything to do, it's actually pretty easy as a developer to just go and do it. But the problem is the real world's not like that. In the real world, you're often learning new things on a daily basis that is going to impact your development. And so in the real world, and especially in mobile, where the world changes on a daily basis, that's Agile is really the approach that we try to do as much as we can. And actually, it's a wide spectrum. There's actually combinations of the two that people do, but this concept of the iterative process is really a great approach in mobile, because usually you don't have a full concept of what you need to do to, at the end of the day, to actually be successful in whatever you're trying to implement. You're honed in, maybe you're 80% of the way there, but that other 20% is what's crucial to success. And actually, one example of that I wanted to bring up, because I just had a meeting with Apple on this, is the research kit. I don't know if anybody's heard about research kit. Is anybody planning to use it? Said, at least I want to know more about it. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, came out, and it was a big Apple Watch announcement, but one of the things he threw in there as well is that there's this research kit thing now, and it's supposed to help people in the research field, whatever you're trying to research. There's all kinds of mechanisms in this kit that will essentially make it much more cost effective to create apps that help you do research. And so everyone's pretty excited. Especially in areas like this where there's very university oriented. And everyone's like, that's great. What is it? What can you actually use? And they really didn't tell you. And so everyone's in scramble trying to figure out what you can use. But I actually just had a meeting with some internal people at Apple, and that was actually pretty enlightening in terms of what they're actually doing. So I know that's not completely the focus of this, but if anybody has any questions, I'm willing to share whatever they told me, because I think it might actually have some impact on what you guys are doing if anybody's planning to work in the research area. So one last thing I wanted to do is just give you an example. Again, the focus was on UX research, and I wanted to kind of give you an idea of using an example that most people are familiar with weather. I've done several apps now that are in the weather area, and so this is something I've lived a lot of, but there's some really interesting things that even come out of something as basic as weather. And so this is where we're interacting. So I'm going to ask you guys, who here uses their weather apps a lot on their phones? All right, so I wanted to ask you, so what is the goal of using your app?
Check the temperature of the day to decide what I wear the day.
To decide what you're wearing, right? So that's what, when you're doing it UX research, we're usually trying to get what is the end goal of the user. So the temperature is important, but the goal actually is to, why do you want to know your temperature, right? It's to know what I'm going to wear that day. And so we actually did a lot of research on, UX research on the goals of users of weather apps. And what we came up with was that, actually most of the apps out there don't actually tell you what you're looking for. Temperature is important, but if you want to know what you're going to wear, a lot of times what comes into play is the precipitation factor. And most people think that these apps tell you, there's little percentages that those are telling you that that's the chance of rain you're going to have, say, in like the next hour. And what that actually is the percentage of the area that you're in, what percentage of that area has rain at any given moment. And of course, that's also a forecast, so that's not guaranteed. But most people don't even know that. So most of the data out there that people are using for their from their weather apps, they don't even realize what it actually is telling them. And so they're using it kind of in the wrong way, because they don't even know what it is. And really every single weather app out there, like major weather apps, AccuWeather, Weather Channel, they're all doing this, right? So these are the experts in the field. They've been living, breathing weather for decades now. And they don't even give you what you're really looking for as a user. And that's where UX research really can come into play and say, hey, look, why don't we step back and figure out what is it that our users really trying to figure out here? And so there's actually, in the weather world, there's this new API called Forecast.io, and they actually tell you down to the minute when it's going to rain next. And so within an hour, it's just scary accurate. Like it will tell you it's going to rain in 10 minutes, and if you sit there and time it, it'll rain in 10 minutes. And it'll say it's going to stop in 17 minutes, and then it'll stop in 17 minutes. That's what people are actually looking for. But they have their own proprietary algorithms. Some really smart guy at MIT factored in all the other data out there, and he can tell you, down to your GPS location, what's going to happen to you specifically. And as it turns out, that's what everybody's looking for in these weather apps. But all these billion-dollar companies couldn't provide that. And that's actually an interesting thing too. You don't have to be a billion-dollar company to do what your user is actually looking for. You just have to actually spend a little time figuring it out, whereas most people don't do that. So I don't know why the experts don't get it. I mean, this is something that's known, how to do UX research, but a lot of people don't do that. So that's why I want to encourage you to do. Angela was saying the same thing. That's really important. So, thanks.
Tough guy. You guys can't see this, but there's a timer sitting right there. Blinking at. So what are you doing?
Is that 15 hours? All right, so thank you for the chance to come speak to you today. My name is Larry Allen. I'm a general internist here and director for the Center for Health Communications Research. Like I said, we just had our 20th anniversary. We're P50 Center of Excellence in Cancer Communications Research. All of us there at the center, we're really dedicated to this simple concept of the right message for the right person at the right time and delivered in the right way. We talked a lot about mobile technologies. I think mobile offers certain things, but as you said, mobile isn't always the right answer. So I think it's really thinking about what is the person, where the people. That's where we all start. We've been doing this work for a while. We're approaching our 200th project. And in that work, I'd probably fair to describe us as technology agnostic in the sense that we don't believe that there's necessarily one channel that's the right channel for all people. It's really understanding the people that are going to be using your program and understanding what are the channels of communication that work for them. Maybe we'll do things in print, maybe we'll do things on the web, we'll do mobile, we'll do social media. Increasingly, we're using sort of combined modalities. So for example, for older patients that still like to hold something, we might do some of the assessment in an automated fashion, maybe through an interactive phone program, and then we'll produce print materials for them, for example. So it's all about what is it that we think resonates as most value and meaning for the people we're trying to serve. For this work, we've received numerous awards in medical media and health communication. And I think that the secret sauce, if there is a secret sauce to our approach, is really the concept of a multidisciplinary team. At the risk of alienating part of our team. I would say we feel strongly that a developer and a researcher should never be unchaperoned in the same room together. It's really important, I think, when you're trying to get a good product, and this reinforces the message that everybody else is getting, that you have really thinking about sort of basic principles of communication, right? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What are the messages you're trying to convey? How do you create those messages? And how does theory inform the development of your messages, right? So that's our behavioral science team. We have a creative design team that really thinks about how do we make this appear for the user, and how is it engaging for the user, and it's about the importance of user interface. We have our technology team that's really responsible for making everything happen, and because of their understanding of what's possible in the technology world, I think opens up potential for both the investigators and also the other members of the team. And then we have the management team that helps keep everything together and hopefully makes the development process one of sort of shared discovery and delight, we'll call it. We tend to, we've made a shift from a more waterfall method, I would say, to a more agile method in terms of our approach, and more about that later. In terms of tailoring, we think of that as a process where there's some assessment of the individual characteristics relevant to whatever behavior we're trying to affect. We use algorithms then to generate messages that are relevant to the user and try to send that back to them in feedback that's clear, vivid, and engaging. So you can think about a large library of potential messages related to different information needs, emotional states, degrees of uncertainty, different strengths in the person's environment, maybe in some future state, their genetic profile. That if we learn something about those individual characteristics, what we can identify is the content that's most relevant to them, and then weave that together into a tailored or personalized message, right? The goals of tailoring are to influence the way in which people process information. We need to grab their attention. We need to, at times, have people engage in effortful processing. We need them to think about the message and its relevance to them. And we want to be able to generate an emotional response. And if we do that in the right way, targeting what we think is important, the right theoretical constructs that are related to behavior, whether it's self-efficacy, attitudes, or normative beliefs, we think we can be more likely in changing behavior. All of our goal here, I say all the speakers, and largely all of you, is we're trying to make an impact or a difference in the world. We really do that through a combination of our efficacy and reach. We know in the world, of course, that there are very effective interventions that unfortunately are not scalable, like good one-on-one counseling. There is not enough counselors to do all the counseling that's probably needed in the world, or even just for me personally. Of course, there's bad one-on-one counseling, which is low reach and low efficacy, and I've been in that situation. Too. Of course, there's high-reach interventions, public service advertisements that, a lot of reach, but you question how much of a difference those are really making out in the world. There's group health education, which might have a little bit more reach. And we think that with individually tailored, computerized program, mobile and otherwise, we can find a sweet spot that both has high reach and high efficacy. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of work that's going on in our center around this issue of understanding how our messages are being processed by people. This is work being done in Neuroscience Corps, that's part of our center. And we've asked the question, when you tailor or personalize messages, how does that affect the way in which people process them? So these are studies where people are exposed to either generic messages or highly tailored messages, and then we take pictures of their brain while they're being exposed to these different sorts of messages. And what we've shown is that when we tailor messages the right way, we can preferentially activate areas of the brain that are associated with memory formation and considered thought and thinking. And that when we do that successfully, these people, where we activate these areas of the brain, they're more likely to go on and make successful changes in their behavior. So it's the application of sort of neuromarketing approaches, you might say, to some of our work in tailored personalized health communication. In terms of our development process, we do most of our work right now in the grant-related space. And so you can think of this as sort of pre-award and post-award. So what happens in terms of getting the proposal together, and what happens after the proposal is awarded. And if there's any funders in the room, we always do exactly what we write in the right? In fact, what we actually do is everything we we wrote in the grant and then usually is how it usually happens. In terms of the development processes, we expect to engage with researchers, investigators with a range of expertise. We definitely don't expect people to come with a UX designer or to have any understanding of the specific vocabulary that they might need to have to talk to developers. And so what we want to do is basically engage with people as early as possible, for those of you out there, as early as possible before the grant deadline, to meet and discuss and brainstorm. And we have a process, a spreadsheet that we usually work through with people that asks them to walk through, think about a typical user, a couple of your typical users, and what's that experience like from the moment they start your intervention through the end of your intervention. And what we find in that process is that oftentimes we're contributing not just the development of technology, but we're sort of refining the scientific process as well. Because it's really important to understand what you're trying to change and why you're trying to change it, as much as how you might change those things. So I feel like, and it's really a credit to our teams that do this consultation. It's not just a consultation with me, it's a consultation with all of our team members that are working in these different areas to think about really what is the underlying goal and approach that would be the most important. Based on that, we build a high-level proposal. We'll help with writing sections of the proposal, and then we'll do a budget associated with that. We've continued to be fairly successful in the grant funding world. You probably know about some of the constraints at NIH at the federal level. I would say that we've grown from 12 people to almost 30 people during the time that NIH funding lines have dropped. So I think we've been successful, and I think it's a really credit to the team doing that, which lets us have a happy chance of working in the post-award period. And we're probably doing, Rex, help me out here, 20 to 30, we start 20 to 30 new projects a year.
We have 30 on the books for the next 12 months.
All right, okay, 30 on the books for the next 12 months, which I'm going to talk to some of these other development groups about as we get into that work. But in terms of post-award, we like to get together, read and review the grant that we write, talk about the initial priorities, but realize that oftentimes things change between the sort of pre-award and the post-award period. So in my own experience, I wrote and got a grant once from NIH. This betrays my age a little bit. So between the time I submitted the grant and when we were awarded the grant, two interesting things happened on the internet. One was called Facebook, and one was called YouTube, right? And so it's like, literally, when I put the grant in, those things weren't there, and then they were there, right? And so it's like, all right, so we can't probably do exactly what we proposed to do. And so then it's going back to the drawing board, realizing what's going on in the world, and thinking about how to be creative in terms of developing your programs. Yeah, in that process, there's a couple things to say. One is that we are pretty committed to an agile development process, so we're not going to ask you to give us a 200-page document, and then we're not going to give you back the final product after reading your 200-page document, but we really believe in sort of an iterative development process where we will be in frequent contact and interaction with the scientists to make sure that things are developing in the right path. That can be as often as 2 or 3 times a week. We like it to be at least every week or every 2 weeks. We don't like to go months without interacting with our teams. And then finally, we want to get to a final feature set where there's strong interaction engagement with the user and then strong usability assessment as well. And, in the plug to Drew's program, we're also working to encourage our scientists to file idea reports with other projects so they get into the pipeline. This is just a sample of a project we did actually with Sean Lee around mobile data. So I'll just show that to you if I can make it play. And there's sound. Can you guys sort of hear that? Is that okay? Sounds. What?
You put the mic on the speaker?
Since kids are constantly growing and changing, we're always improvising. We all want our kids to grow healthy, smart, and strong. But let's face it, most of us parents have little idea what we're doing. It can be hard to know what your baby needs and how to help them when they're unhappy. So we depend on our parents, friends, books to help us out, especially when we're at our wits' end. Now, we can also turn to Mobile Dad. The Mobile Dad app will provide you with parenting information that speaks directly to your experiences as a father of a young child and part of a military family. You'll receive real advice from other fathers who work hard to take care of their families, deployments, long hours, and relocations. Plus, you'll have the opportunity to help other fathers in similar situations. You'll be able to use Mobile Dad to keep track of your child's growth and your activities together by uploading pictures, videos, and other content. After about 8 weeks, you'll get a record of this period in your child's life. As father to a toddler, I sometimes wonder how it's possible that such a small person can demand so much from me. I also wonder how that same little person can make me laugh out loud so often. Mobile Dad is here to help with the hard work of raising kids and to increase the fun. Welcome to Mobile Dad.
So with that, my time is just about up, and rather than cross Drew in any way,
Fred wrap us up, so thank you very much.
Great. Hello, everyone. It's working. Okay. I'm Fred Dillon, the Director of Product Development at HopeLab in California, and we try to take the power and appeal of technology and harness it to help young people live healthy, thriving lives. That's sort of our goal. And we're the health lens of the Omidyar Group. It's a bunch of foundations under the Omidyars who Pam and Pierre Omidyar. Pierre was the founder of eBay, and so we represent their philanthropic interests around health specifically. So HopeLab started with an idea. Pam had an idea way back in college. She was studying cancer cells under a microscope and thought, wouldn't it be great if somehow kids who had cancer could actually fight their cancer directly through a video game? And by blasting away those cancer cells could actually have an impact on their health. So the first 5 years of HopeLab was actually all about building that game, where it really tried to help kids feel like they had power over their cancer, that they could actually beat it, that they had a role to play, to give them a sense of self-efficacy. All about that. We built the game, and we also then did a randomized control trial to prove whether it worked or not. Again, the slides are coming out weird. So what we found is not only did we have cancer knowledge go up, but more importantly, self-efficacy was increased, and they actually took their chemotherapy more regularly. So what we did in this, we had some kids play the remission game, and some kids play Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which was a popular game at that point in time. And compare the two groups, and this is what we found. So the other thing we discovered as we developed this was a recipe for impact. And that's what I think you all are really interested in as well. How do we get from an idea to an actual health outcome? And what we have found is there's sort of 3 steps that are really key. The first is to clearly identify the behavior change you're after. Be real and spend a lot of time thinking about that. Get really clear about who the user is, who you want to have this happen, and what is the specific thing you want to see happen in the world. And you can actually video record. You can actually see them do something as a result. The second is to understand the psychology. What is getting in their way, or what are their aspirations, what are the things they really care about, and get really deeply, and this is where customer interviews, what we talked about earlier, is absolutely crucial. This whole lens of design thinking, and how going in-home, in-context interviews with people to really understand is really key. And then design technology to affect the psychology that will then affect the health behaviors. So just briefly, in the cancer case specifically, are the things we wanted among many were, 1, we wanted the kids to regularly take their medications, and 2, we wanted them to report symptoms when they happened. And those 2 things I think often teens do not end up doing when they come out, and it can really put them at risk for remission or for even death. So we want to understand the psychology, and we found where there were a few key things. One was positive emotions, tapping into their aspirations, things they really care about. So really focusing on the positive emotions and trying to promote those as much as possible. Feelings of self-efficacy, feelings of power that they can fight their disease. And the third is shifting their attitudes towards chemotherapy, making sure they understood chemotherapy was on their side. It was actually a tool in their arsenal kit, and even though it made them feel crappy, it was actually being helpful to them. So how do we shift those attitudes and rebrand chemotherapy? So then we designed technology to have those things happen. And through that, this is one example of the recent games we created. This is Remission 2, where the kids really wanted to attack cancer. They wanted to be able to fight it and kill it in a whole number of ways. So here, these cancer cells are trying to get up into the bloodstream and metastasize. And the player is given lots of ways to kill and attack cancer. So it gives them real energy around what it feels like to do that in their bodies. Let's see. And we took all this learning and applied it to 6 games you can actually access at remission2.org. If you're interested in seeing these games and playing them, they're all available for free there. So, we've also applied this recipe to our latest area of focus, which is resilience. And we define resilience as people's innate capacity to persevere through adversity, challenge, insult, or injury, the ability to bounce back. And our aim is to help people respond to adversity in healthy ways so that they can thrive. And again, what we did here was look at the psychology. What do we know about what helps people be more resilient? It's not just something you're born with. It's something you can actually cultivate. So what are the psychological experiences that can do that? We've identified 3 key things. The first is purpose, or far-reaching and steady goals, something transcendent, something outside of yourself that you really care about. And in fact, here, University of Michigan, Vic Strecker has done a lot of work on this. And said purpose is as important as quitting smoking in terms of our health. There's a lot going on there. In fact, it's been found that people with a low sense of purpose are 2.4 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's than those with a high sense of purpose. They're also less likely to get heart attacks and strokes, and they live longer. So purpose is really key. The second is a real sense of connection with people that you love. And by this, I mean really deep, authentic connection and intimacy, and sort of the opposite of loneliness is what we're really talking about. And there's been lots of studies. Loneliness and social isolation is really bad for your health, and it makes you really not resilient. When something bad happens to you, if you don't have those social connections, you're in a lot of danger. And in fact, it's even been found people who are isolated and alone are more likely to get sick as well. The third is control. And by this, we really mean the feeling that I have control over my own destiny. I actually have a part to play in this. So again, this is often, self-efficacy, a feeling that I can learn this, I can do this, I can make this happen, even if this is learning how to tie my shoes. Boosting self-efficacy can help change our behavior, even our biology. It can help us stick to exercise regimens, it can help us take our medications, and it can help us heal, just as we've seen from our work on remission. So, how do we begin to design products that intentionally cultivate purpose, connection, and control? That's what we're now all about at HopeLab. How do we do this? And how do we take sort of all this highfalutin psychology and research and now bake it into an app or other tech product? So we think mobile is really the place to go here with these things because it's in our everyday lives. We're just, as everyone has talked about, we're just surrounded by this stuff. We're carrying these phones around us. So how can we get purpose, connection, and control built into some of these apps? What might that look like? So increasingly, as you all know, we use mobile tech to figure out where we're going to go eat. We use mobile tech to get us around. We text more than we talk anymore. So mobile is really why we feel it so powerfully could have effects in this area. So this is our goal right now, is how do we build mobile tech to cultivate purpose, connection, and control. So at HopeLab, we're exploring an approach where we partner with collaborators who are seeking to create tech products that motivate positive behaviors, and help people respond to life's adversities in healthy ways. And what we're doing basically with these partners is we're taking ideas they have that they started to maybe iterate on, done some prototyping on, or just been thinking about, and then take it, incubate it, optimize it, do a lot of their user research to understand what's behind it, and then help them build out some our initial versions and tests, and then have them go out and distribute it in the world. So now we can just give you one example of this. We have partnered with Dr. Mark Brackett and his team at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And they have a socio-emotional learning program for kids called Ruler. It's all about helping kids self-regulate understand their emotions and regulate their emotions. So very much a sense of control as well, getting a sense of control over your own emotions. And one of the tools they use is something called the mood meter. and it helps students identify their emotions. And it's on a two-axis grid. One side is low in pleasure, high in pleasure, and the other is energy, high in energy, low in energy. So if you're high in energy and high in positivity, the kind of emotions you might feel are joy, happiness, excitement, etc. If you're low in energy, low in joy, this is where you might feel sad, depressed, mopey, all those kind of words are in this area. So what Mark was interested in is, so we use this in the classroom, but we don't want to extend this outside the classroom. And we want more of the general public to be able to benefit from this as well. So how can we take this tool and turn it into a mobile app? And so that's how we've got connected and talked about this. So what do? How do we go from there? Well, the first thing, again, to do is spend lots of time with potential users, collect all their stories, talk to them, sort them. We do a lot of this at HopeLab to really understand and get to the bottom of what's going to be effective for them. And then I'm just going to talk about one process we use in particular to get there. So for a lot of folks, they have an idea for a mobile app, like many of you may have in this room, and then they kind of write up the requirements, they figure out what they want the core functionality to be, then they approach a development firm or whoever, and they say, hey, can you build this? And they get together and they make it happen. So, and that can certainly work. We use a slightly different approach where we try to get a lot of ideas creatively at the outfront around the user experience and in particular, so that you can then test it with users way early on before you're actually in the build process. Because it's a lot less expensive to test design ideas in just a graphical form than it is to test after it's built. And so to do that, a couple things we do. One is to shrink the scope of work. And so in this case, we had lots of ideas for the functionality of the Mood Meter app that was going to have a whole bunch of things. You could set timers and ask you how you're feeling about the day, or see records of how you did over time. We decided the most important experience is this plotting. What does that actually look and feel like? What's the user interface of that? So what we did is we went out together, lots and lots of ideas of what this might look like. And so we tapped into different designers that we knew, and here gave them the basic what we wanted out of this, and they sent us proposals on it, sent us stuff in. We also use some crowdfunding ways of doing this, crowdsourcing ways of doing this. There's a site called 99 Designs, where you can put something out and you give a winner an award. You get lots of design concepts as a result through that. There's another one called CrowdSpring as well. And then you pick a favorite or even combine favorites. And this is really great. You have all these ideas now. You kind of look at them and decide, okay, which ones make sense to mix and match. So in this case, and then how do you do that? How do you figure it out? You talk to your users. You go back and we do a survey. We do a lot of survey work with users. We do a lot of in-person interviews, focus groups, a whole host of things to get at the bottom of it. And in this particular case, this is the one that ultimately ended up being the one that won and had the best outcome. As you can see here, the user can move around, figure out what they want to plot as they're feeling, put that in, and they can record a little diary notice of how they were feeling, as well as if they want to shift out of that feeling state, get some tips of how they might move into another feeling state if that's what they want to do. It also gives them records of how they felt over time, etc. And you can get this is actually available on iOS, and the Android version just came out. So very excited about that.
What's the name?
The Mood Meter app. Mood Meter. Yeah. And so, what I would just say, we really try to incorporate the user feedback all along the way, and kind of keep them front and center in our work. Just a couple more slides here. We've taken the same approach and we've applied it in different areas. So this is a site we're working with the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley, and they're really interested in positive psychology and how do we get people to access. There's a lot of research on what works to have people have more gratitude or have more compassion or have more empathy. But there's no centralized place where people can access those tools and figure out what's available. So they came to us and said, can you help us design and build a portal where people can access these things? They could actually sort by, say, I want to look for things that will bring me awe, or will bring me empathy, or will bring me self-compassion. Then you can dive in deeper, you can actually look at these. It's sort of like an Epicurus, if you will, for positive psychology, where you can actually write about what worked and what didn't about these and share it with other people who are on it. And you can have a whole page where you can have your practice and keep track of which ones you use. So this hasn't launched yet. It'll launch later this year. It'll be called Greater Good in Action. So I'll be sure to send that along to the organizers when it comes out. Another project we work on is with Sarah Conrad. She talked about this briefly earlier, called Text to Connect. It's a research study we're doing right now to try to promote empathy in teens. And we work with Sarah really closely to figure out how to optimize these messages for teens. What's the right voice? What's the right tone? what's going to sound right to them, to get them thinking more about other people and to be paying attention and get in their perspectives. So these are just a couple examples of the messages that we've tested. And in fact, as Sarah said, there's early data on this from a pilot study she conducted that found that it actually can reduce aggressiveness and increase empathy over time. So we're really optimistic. So this study is open right now for teens to enter. So I would just conclude by saying we're kind of at a revolution right now with social technology, and it's all about how can we use this, again, intentionally and consciously to promote these resilience building factors of purpose, connection, and control. That's it.
Thank you, Fred. And I always have certain empathy when you go with the High Wire Act with a great presentation, with lots of stuff moving around, and it doesn't sometimes always go 100% the way that you want. It worked.
I was resilient. I was. That's right. Good purpose.
So that demonstrated resilience. So we've got about 25 minutes, and that 25 minutes is yours to use to try and pick the brain of these folks and ask them questions about the different things you've heard. I was trying to keep count of the word user, and I lost count at 89. So maybe that's something worth thinking about, but we're just gonna open it up to questions first. If you guys don't have questions, I'm gonna start asking them, but this is your time, so, just someone here, we can pass the mic around for you guys.
This question's for Keith. Wondering if you could elaborate more on the research kit by Apple.
Sure. So like I said, when it came out, it sounded great, like there's probably a lot of promise, but they don't really give you a lot of tips. And you know, the main thing was it was Tim Cook up there talking about Apple Watch. He's like, oh yeah, we got this research kit, and then he jumped on to the next topic, and it's probably not the best venue to elaborate on developer type of stuff anyway. But even after that, we go to the websites, and there's just not a lot of good documentation. So I'm actually working on a project with Vic. So we were talking to them today about, you know, there's some Apple people in town here, and we were able to get them and pick their brains and at least get a little bit closer to what Research Kit does. And it's essentially, so the way these frameworks work in these platforms is they essentially take a lot of things that you would normally do as a developer, and before these frameworks exist, you can do what these things do, but it's much harder, takes a lot more time, much more costly. And so what they've done is they've looked through all the different things that people are doing in the research community, and they've created essentially modules that help you do that research more effectively and essentially develop the apps that do that research more effectively. So there's like a module for getting the informed consent. And there's all kinds of variables that you can, parameters you put on that, which it's like, you can put a signature, you can set it up to send the information to different places and things like that. So there's all these things actually connected to the informed consent form that goes in the app for that. It also there's a survey module. So if you've ever gone in and built a survey, you can do it in an iPhone app, but it takes a while to go through and do it. So they have this mechanism now where you can essentially just, probably code what used to take 2 or 3 weeks. Now you can do it in a day for setting up surveys and things like that. And trying to think of some of the other things that they were talking about, but it's essentially it's just all these different things that when you're doing research, or I know it's like the audio stuff they talked about up on the screen when they're talking about it. There's mechanisms that essentially let you detect stuff like, audio files are one thing, but it's like connecting a file to whatever parameters you're trying to pick up on, and then you write the algorithm that essentially says, okay, if there's these types of peaks and valleys in the audio stream, then it means this, or send this information somewhere. But they essentially have simplified the whole process of writing that algorithm into your research database. And then at the end of the day, they're essentially giving you access to to the iPhone ecosystem, and they set it up in a way that it will basically make it much easier for you to get access to a much larger sample population than what was previously, capable. So, yeah, just a lot of really cool things coming out of that. There's another component is the connection to HealthKit. One of the big questions we had was, one of the connections with HealthKit was that we didn't know if you required HealthKit in order for this to be used, because things like you can't use HealthKit on the iPads, you can only use them on phones. But there is no requirement to be used to it, but you can tap into HealthKit and get all the data that's in the HealthKit, which is like people's pedometer, their heart rate monitoring, all that kind of stuff. You can pull all that information into whatever research you're doing, and a lot of that data is just sort of like offered up to you, through this research kit. So a lot of cool stuff.
I guess I have one just quick question, and if you know, great if you don't. I mean, I looked at the research kit and I was it's about a 4-page document. It was extremely ambiguous.
Yeah.
Did they give you a specific date when you're going to publish some of the details you just heard?
So they said they're going to open source it next month.
Okay.
And like really soon. So this is one of the big things, like Apple doesn't open source anything. And they're open sourcing the code for this, which essentially for a developer, once they've open sourced something, we can just go in and figure everything out that it does at a level that they couldn't tell you in the documents. So that's really big. But I'm assuming that at that point they'll also provide a lot more documentation.
Awesome. Good question. Sounds exciting.
To what extent, this is for everybody, to what extent do you use cross-platform development tools when you're making these native apps, and why or why not?
So I'll start. So we try to shy away from cross-platform. We inherit a lot of projects that started off as cross-platform, and they ended up hitting a lot of problems with it. A lot of times what happens is it provides essentially another layer, and a lot of times that layer doesn't keep up with the platform. So like iOS 8 comes out, you're stuck for 4 weeks with something that's broken, that's out there in the market, and that can cause a lot of problems. So just, it's a little bit of a simplified thing, but basically we've had a lot of issues with cross-platform development. But I do think there's some uses for it. It's more like in environments where if that happens, it's not as big of a deal. So maybe not a consumer app, but maybe something that's internally a corporate app. You're doing, for a research standpoint, if it's something that you can live with that issue, there's some potential there.
I think I'll just add too that, I was talking before about minimum viable product and what do you want for phase one. Cross-platform development can be less expensive than going native and trying to release on many native platforms. And so it can be a good first step, knowing that, you'll need to make some improvements down the road.
Yeah, we considered it. One of the remission games we did port over to be a downloadable app, and we ended up using Adobe Air for that, and that ended up being successful for that particular product. But as we moved more into like the mood meter, it was very strongly recommended to us to build for one of the platforms first, get that working, make sure it works really well, and then do it for the other.
I think basically I'm going to second what everybody said. I think that from what we've been told anyways, if you're trying to do something super simple, some of the cross-platform stuff can make the super simple things a little bit simpler. But if you're trying to do something a little bit more complex and a little bit more refined, that you can't actually accomplish that effectively in the cross-platform systems. And the solution, or a partial solution, depending on what exactly you need to go, I'm being taught by our teams that sometimes going with sort of a mobile web solution might get you what you need, because it gets onto both operating systems a little bit easier. It depends on what exact features and functions you need.
I think it's going to be an interesting conversation as Bourne Jasper kind of does this presentation about some of the native functionality of phones and what's there. Thinking about that, that's always a really important question when you think about what you want to develop. Specifically to the phone or some of these alternative solutions. I would only say, based on my own experience, there's very rarely complete truth in the notion of one size fits all, and it is by everywhere in those environments. Other questions?
Yeah. Noticed during Mr. Dillon's presentation, there was a part where you pointed out, that sometimes people come to us with a kind of solution description in hand, and in the traditional kind of app developer client relationship, people will go ahead and build it. And then you kind of highlighted the process that happens at Hope Labs, and I was hoping you could dive into that a little more and explain why that's important. And yes, that is a loaded question, but I'm asking it for a reason.
Yeah, so I think the question is just why do we choose the process we do to get all. So from our point of view, as we've done this over the years, and we have done both sides. We have done come up with a huge long document and go to one developer and have them do the whole thing. And over again, that has not worked well. It worked out always well for us. And what we have found is having these much shorter, smaller scopes of work. One, it gets you a lot more ideas in-house, so you can get a lot more, you can put in front of users more quickly and get their reactions to. And then two, it lets you test the relationship with these designers and developers and figure, is this someone I can work with and I work well with? So instead of getting into a mega contract with someone, having them do everything, you're kind of really doing it in bite-sized pieces. And for us, we've learned that to be a really helpful approach. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I also wanted to kind of ask the panel in general, like, is that an approach that you guys have found to be successful in terms of developing these things when clients come to you? Just very focused problems that have a lot of customer discovery data behind it.
Sure, and I can't remember which one of these gentlemen said it, but somebody said that sometimes they reject ideas, or sometimes they say it's not going to work like this, or you need to consider something else. And I think probably Keith can speak to that too, that sometimes people come in and they say, I want a mobile app that does this, and we say, that's great. Once the user does that, then what are they going to do, and why are they going to keep coming back to your app? Because, it sounds like they're going to use this once, and then that's the end of the road. And, sometimes people have an answer for that, and then sometimes there's right? And so talking to people about what's the next step, what is the end goal, how do you keep users engaged, sometimes leads to, let's pare back the functionality and go with a much smaller thing. Sometimes it leads to, this isn't a mobile app. This is a mobile website, or this is, a web application or something, an Xbox game. So it might be, as you're talking to the client, you might find it's not a good fit, or you might find the project is much more useful as something else.
Yeah, what she said.
I think it's a really good point. Just commercially, if you're working with somebody, I think it's a very, very early indicator of the strength of the relationship. If somebody tells you something is not a good idea, it really is. I mean, if somebody's saying yes, yes, yes to everything, and you're writing checks to them, I start to have some red flags as to what value they're actually bringing back, because they're experts in what they do. They should challenge you a little bit about what you're trying to execute on. So always yes is really not a good sign, in my experience.
Yeah, so I would second that. I'll also admit to a certain amount of personal attention. I think all the members of our staff can probably attest to the fact that I'm probably famous for having too many ideas and too many priorities. But there's always a balance. But I have insight now into that part of my personality. But I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to find that right balance, right? So that's why I think these early conversations are really important with whomever you're working with, to really refine and try to find the essence of what you're trying to do. And sometimes, there's of the three pieces of your original idea, one of the pieces plus a new piece that came up in conversation, that's what you really want to do, right? And so I would encourage people to be sort of open and think about the whole process as a bit of a discovery process. Eventually it has to get locked down, but when you're in the conversation part of it, I think it's really important to let the juices continue.
And one other thing I would say about the process we use, I think whenever you're dealing with art, or like what's the look and feel, what's the style you want, it's really helpful to get several different pictures of that, so again, you can get kind of user feedback and really understand, okay, I think teams are going to want this, and then you find out, no, they actually want something completely different, and I just think it's super important to pay attention to it. That's why we use the process we do.
I think it's a really good point. There's the idea that you have, and it's sometimes confusing for people. There's the idea, there's the concept you have, and then there's the interpretation of that idea. The design side starts to become the interpretation of what that idea is, and you heard me at my pitch this morning, we're not doing design. We're not. The people here and the people you work with are the people who should be able to say, there are multiple approaches to it. It's the oldest thing since the internet. The second day of the internet, somebody started doing multivariate analysis. Is A better than B? And, you know, that's the beauty of the form, unlike manufacturing a car saying you like this one or this one, the upfront costs of that are very, very cheap, so you should feel very, very comfortable with that as a concept.
I'd like to ask Fred on his experience with the remission on the design. So you mentioned a very interesting behavior change to psychology and then the design thing. So I was curious, like, how did you, from your UX research or customer interviews, how did you come up with a game solution that maps onto the psychology that can motivate them to take their pills and do their stuff? Like, what was the transition?
It's a really long, it was a long, painful process, honestly, because we were one of the first thinking about it, doing it. I think when Pam had that initial idea, she didn't know what she was stepping into, honestly. And then she started to bring together oncologists, nurses, the teams themselves, and the game experts, all in the same room, and getting them to talk the same language, talk about a chasm. The chasm, it was really huge trying to get them, but she really stuck with it, and she stuck with, let me find a psychologist and the people who really understand what's going on in these kids' lives and talk deeply with them, in addition to talking to the users themselves to really get at what are the core concepts. So again, what I would emphasize is that getting really clear what's the behavior change you want to see. So we got really clear about that. In the beginning, we didn't even have that. And a lot of people don't have that. They just have an idea, but they haven't really identified what are you trying to change in behavior. And then two, going okay, deeply, what is the psychology here? What are the aspirations? What are the obstacles? What are the things that are getting in the way that I could maybe nudge here and have an effect on? So, and then bake that into the game is basically what we did. And
so why game? Why not like just a management like app?
Sure. In this case, I think we felt like, and again, Pam's original idea was sort of with a game in mind, and I think it was really about the fun factor. And we often have a design principle we kind of stick with is lead with fun and health will follow, especially with the younger market that we're after. And so that's a pretty key element for us in terms of how we feel like we're going to have the most positive impact. But I would say a game was super expensive, especially the first game we built, and we learned a ton from that and learned how to make it much less expensive. If people are, I'm happy to talk about that afterwards as well.
You have a question?
Yeah, this question is more practical, I think. So there's a lot of upfront investment, it seems, in anything that we decide to do. So if we have an idea, we want to get a grant for it. But it feels like there's a lot of steps even before we get to the proposal stage. So I guess this question might be for Larry. Like, what funding is out there to actually, well, to develop the interventions, but in advance of that proposal, we're in a grant-funded situation. So how much time and energy do we need to put in before we get to the proposal writing stage?
So I don't think there's one right or wrong answer to that. I think there's one thing we hear people say that I would probably try to disabuse them of, and that's when they say NIH won't pay for development. Because we're in fact funded to do development for projects related to NIH, right? So some people feel like they have to fully develop their entire program before they can apply for their grant, and I would be the first to say that's really not true, and you shouldn't feel that kind of constraint, right? So that being said, it always helps to have done some initial evaluation and to have maybe a minimal, maybe half of a minimal viable product that might be available. And I think there's a lot of creative ways to do that. We heard about doing the crowdsourcing of initial designs. I think that would be actually a really compelling thing to do as preliminary work for a grant we would be putting together. So there's things that we could do, or that different people on the panel could talk to you about, I'm sure, about how to show the reviewer that you put a little bit more thought into this other than deciding you want to do an Xbox game, right? So and there's ways to do that. And I would suggest that some of these crowdsourcing mechanisms to do design review and to get some initial population feedback on your ideas would be a useful way to go.
I also think just talking about it as a design approach, that what you're trying to fund really is design thinking to inform what an ultimate product would be. So I think you might be able to put it that way, and then people hopefully, people who know anything about product development kind of understand some of the design thinking lingo and may understand that's a whole body of work that needs to happen that is expensive in and of itself. And we, for example, when we were developing another product, went to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and they ended up funding some of our design thinking work on the activity monitor stuff we did.
And then, so the last thing I would say, just in terms of a local resource, and maybe Drew wants to say something more about this too, or Connie who's in the audience. So, particularly within the health system, there's this Fast Forward Medical Innovation Initiative. There's a structure called MTRAC, which is a grant that was awarded to the University of Michigan, a combination of state funding and funding from the medical school to do sort of startup type work. And what's the award range for the Kickstarter awards?
25 to 35,000.
So you can apply for sort of internal funding in that sort of range, which is usually enough to get things started. One of the things I'm really happy about is we have a new deputy director, Rex Timms, many of you might have met, who's done this sort of innovation work for Johnson & Johnson and other larger companies. And oftentimes what he tells me is an approach that works in that field is to build sort of, it's not really a working prototype, but it's a working demonstration of what a prototype might look like, right? And it can be really useful in convincing your department head, whoever the next investor might be to take you to the next level, that this is something really worth doing. So that's something that's another thing to consider, is to tap into the MTRAC mechanism, Kickstarter award, and thinking about sort of building sort of a demonstration project. It's sort of a hybrid between a demonstration and a prototype.
Thank you for teeing that up to me, because what I was going to tell you too is that there are, and I love free, freemium, low cost resources out there. There's a program called Envision, where you can take your design sketches, pop them in, create hotspots, and it'll put it in a mobile app template right for you, and then you press play and you can interact with it. It's not a prototype, it's not going to do exactly what it should do, but at least when you're in front of somebody or you can email them the link, they can go through and play with it and say, okay, well, I get it, I understand what I'm trying to do here, or what you're trying to do here.
Can you tell us how to spell that?
Envision, Invision. And I think it's envisionapp.com, but I'm not sure about that. If you Google it, it will just come up, yeah. There are, of course, other tools out there that you can do that as well. There are some low-cost wireframing tools, so if you're just doing wireframes, Mockups, which is MOQUPS, is free. Balsamic, which ends in a Q, is very low cost. So there are a lot of things that you don't need to have any technical knowledge except knowing kind of how to use a computer and drag things. I'm going to put this in front of you so you can do things. Down here.
Anybody else, we're getting down on the nitty-gritty here, so.
Yeah, I would just throw out, just to add to that even for simple things, and I agree completely with Larry that R21s, R34s, beautiful ways to get software started. You don't have to have it going into it. People submit grants all the time to start and get good data on a new intervention. But for that pre-spot, for that real early sort of pre-demo mock-up thing, even things like Squarespace or Wix, which are automatically HTML5 responsive web design, you can make a really quick, living, working, interactive thing that can get you some early data as well.
Tomorrow, just to that point, the tie-out presentation, which will be available to everybody, a lot of stuff that Angela talked about, a lot of things we're talking about here. You're going to get a massive list of tools like that are available to you. And I agree, the bar is very low on using those things. I think one of the other things is here at Michigan, you don't have to look that far to get help. The Stanford School in particular is very interested in design-based thinking. It's a big school of thought. Stanford's done a tremendous amount of work. You'll see some links in this program when I roll out that. I know that SPH, School of Public Health, and they do a lot of that with their groups. So there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of these things. So sometimes it's just a little networking and can get you connected with those things as well.
I'd also speak to the SBIR, STTR program at NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health, and other SBIR grants programs. I've been reviewing for them for many years, and we have reviewed many projects like the ones that are talked about in this room.
And they do have a phase 1 and phase 2 award. The phase 1 award is small, but it doesn't require usually too much background. It does require a good idea. A standard app might not be the kind of thing that people are that interested in funding at this point, but app with sensing capabilities, those sorts of things, sensors that you develop or use in concert with a smartphone that might be useful in the treatment of mental health problems. There are a lot of grants being awarded every year that relate to this general topic, and we really encourage you. The STTR is for those who are looking to retain principal investigatorship of the grant, and the small business entity is in a way separate from you, and then the SBIR is usually from the company upward.
Thanks, Jim. Any last questions?
You talked a little bit about crowdsourcing design. I was wondering how, like, you can feel pretty worried about copycats coming in and just taking the design if you don't pick theirs. How do you fend off that feeling of apprehension?
So yeah, that's always a risk. I mean, I think when you put your ideas out there in the marketplace, could someone grab it and make it and decide to go with it? It could happen. We've kind of taken the philosophy, we're just trying to get really great tools out there. So if someone else finds something and wants to go build something that is going to do something the same, we're not too worried about like putting way big garden walls around ourselves to protect that. And generally, these 99 designs and crowds, there are some rules for the artists that are on those about what they can and can't do. So there are pretty strict guidelines that they're supposed to follow. But I just wouldn't say absolutely that they're always adhere to that.
Yeah, well, 99 designs, you can choose to have all the designers sign an NDA so that they can't talk about what they're doing. Again, whether or not they adhere to that is your risk. I think the other thing is don't necessarily be afraid of another app that does what yours does, because a lot of times what that helps you with is educating the public about what you're doing. So it's really hard to go out there and be the first thing and not only tell people what you're doing and why you're great, but also just what it is in general. That's hard. So for me, I wouldn't be afraid of that.
The fundamental thing to keep in mind on the software side of it is you are operating on a burning platform. I mean, you are absolutely better have a real high sense of urgency if you are going to elect to participate in this space. That's just the reality of it. And it is not at the academic speed, I can assure you that. It is absolutely not. So all of you who are offended by that comment, you can come punch me out later. But that's something to keep in mind. That goes right back to this notion of a minimally viable product. Get something out and figure it out. Execution is key. The person who's out there doing it, learning, executing, pivoting, moving on from that is the person who generally wins the day. When I work in the Office of Tech Transfer, the home of intellectual property protection, I would tell you that get going, get something out there and working on it is going to win the day, 99 times out of 100. The patenting process and copyright protection. I couldn't agree more with what Angela's saying. The fact that somebody's doing something similar sometimes is the best information you could ever get.